Closed captioning of this program is made possible by the Fireman's Fund Foundation.
This week, a federal judge clears the way for same-sex marriages to commence, but not until August 18th. A proposal by Google and telecom giant Verizon has supporters of net neutrality up in arms. And California's Native American tribes consider creating renewable energy on their land as an alternative to the casino industry. Also, Senator Barbara Boxer talks with me about California's economy and the upcoming election. Coming up next. Good evening, I'm Belva Davis, and welcome to This Week in Northern California. The U.S. Senate race in California is one of the most competitive in the nation. Businesswoman Carly Fiorina has mounted a vigorous campaign and pulled ahead of three-term Senator Barbara Boxer in at least one poll this week. Money is a big factor in that race, and jobs and the economy are big problems facing Democrats. I talked with Senator Barbara Boxer earlier about those and other issues affecting the upcoming election. Senator, we finally have a jobs bill after many tries, and there's $26 billion there, and over $2 billion for California.
Yes.
But this is a very needy state. While it's a lot of money, will it make a difference here in your home state?
Well, let me tell you what it's going to do. It's going to keep 16,500 teachers on the job. And to me, as someone who went to public schools, I sent my kids to public schools, 95% of all American children go to public schools. We needed to save these jobs. These are hundreds of thousands of jobs nationwide. So specifically, yes, the money is targeted for the teachers. And then there was another, some other dollars we sent to California to help with the health care, to fill in a hole there, which will free up some other money to save police officer jobs, firefighter jobs, nurses jobs. So I think specifically it did make a difference. But as far as the rest of the state budget, I mean, they're going to have to meet in the middle, the Democrats, the Republicans, and the governor, and figure this out. What a nightmare.
Do your colleagues give you a hard time about California not managing itself well? Do you have difficulty getting money for California?
Well, no. A lot of states are in this trouble, Belva, a lot of them, and many. So they all understand what's happening because of this recession. Revenues are down. Some states have done better than others, but the ones that did the best in the, in the prosperity are getting hit the hardest. So really, no, I can't say people are giving me a hard time or Senator Feinstein a hard time. We're all working together to try and make this better because we know we're going to get to better times, but this is a very deep, tough recession, and everybody's feeling it.
You're saying we're all working together. We don't get the feeling back here that there's a lot of working together overall in the Senate today.
Well, a lot of colleagues do work together. I mean, I have to tell you, as tough as it is back there, and we've seen more filibusters from the Republicans in 2 years than there were in all the years of our country, imagine. So it is tough. Still in all, I want you to know, you have to reach across the aisle in order to get anything done. And we don't find many takers, but in this bill that you referred to that saved the teachers, we did get the two main senators, Senators Collins and Snow, two Republicans. So yeah, you have to work across the aisle or you'll never get anything done, because under Senate rules, one senator could stop everything.
Did Democrats have to cut programs that they normally would have supported in order to get this bill?
It's a good question. We did make this bill deficit neutral, but what we were able to do is we cut tax breaks for companies who ship jobs overseas. That was part of the way we got the revenue. And we did look at some other programs that had anticipated inflation at a rate higher than it was coming in, such as the food stamp program, and because it wasn't coming in at a higher price, we were able to save some funds. So yes, we did have to scout around and find a way to do it that was deficit neutral, because we do have a terrible deficit. You know, I remember, Belva, when I got elected to the United States Senate with Senator Feinstein in 1992. Bill Clinton, president then, had a huge deficit. We turned it into surpluses. We actually had a surplus, and we were able to do what we had to do without worrying. But then when George Bush came in and he gave tax breaks to the people at the very top, the millionaires, put it on the credit card, put 2 wars on the credit card, everything went south. And now we're in a situation where when President Obama and the Democrats took over, they inherited, a $1.3 trillion deficit. So we have to be cautious when we do things and use pay-go, which is pay as you go.
There was some disappointment in some quarters over the last money for the military for the 2 wars that are going on right now that some Democrats spoke in favor of because of the troop situation. What can be done really more by even the party in charge having a president of the same party in office when this has been a continuing problem, the whole business of wartime expenditures?
Well, President Obama is pledged to end the Iraq War, and he's begun the reduction of troops, a pretty massive reduction from 144,000 to about, I believe it's about 50,000. And it will continue. In Afghanistan, he says next year he's going to start to bring the troops home. I went on a bill with Russ Feingold that will say to the president, please be more specific. What conditions have to be met? How fast can you bring them home? I would say that the president really wants to bring these troops home because it is a drain, of course, on our families to suffer loss of our magnificent fighting men and women, and it's a drain on our treasury. So I believe he wants to make it happen. And the last point I'll make is I believe in nation helping, not nation building. And we have to be careful we don't get into nation building. We just can't do it.
Okay, the last few seconds.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Last few seconds. What's the primary difference between you and your opponent? What's the number one difference?
Do you have all day?
Oh, no, only 30 seconds.
She wants to go back to the Bush economy. She's anti-choice. She's pro-drilling off the coast. Couple of ideas there.
Couple of ideas, yeah. All right. Well, that was recorded, and we will air part 2 of that conversation with Senator Barbara Boxer on our program next week. Also, KQED News will co-host the September 1st debate between Senator Boxer and Carly Fiorina. Visit kqed.org/thisweek to join in the debate and submit your questions for the candidates. Now, joining me on our news panel, Amy Staton, reporter with KQED's Quest series on the future of renewables on tribal lands. David Spark, reporter with socialmedia.biz on news about net neutrality. And starting with Jesse McKinley with San Francisco Bureau Chief for the New York Times. And you're reporting on Proposition 8 and the actions this week by Judge Walker when he said that he would lift the ban on marriages now. Was that a surprise to anyone, you think?
I don't think it was a surprise. I mean, Walker has made it very clear in his decision last week that he thinks that same-sex marriage should be the law of California and potentially the law of the land. So the fact that he was supportive of lifting the stay, supportive of these marriages continuing, not really a surprise. Now, that being said, he continues to be extremely cautious in this decision. At the same time that he lifted the stay, essentially allowing marriages to continue, he issued another stay that said we have to wait another 6 days to allow the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals to come down and issue their opinion on this. In talking to legal experts about this, some people said essentially he was passing the buck, that he was allowing the Ninth Circuit to step in. And the question of the day now becomes, will the Ninth Circuit stay this? Will the Ninth Circuit say, no, we are going to allow these marriages? And I think that there's 2 schools of thought there. Most people that I talk to seem to think that the Ninth is not going to be inclined to step into this. If that happens, it'll then go to the Supreme Court for another, possible emergency stay.
Jesse, I wanted to ask you about this issue of the state defendant, because of course neither Governor or Attorney General Brown has come in as a defendant to defend Proposition 8. And I think that was considered sort of a weak point of the defense's side in the original trial. And I'm wondering, are we going to see that become a bigger issue either with the appeals court now or later when the case hits the Supreme Court?
I think it's a huge issue. I think if you were online today, pretty much the word of the day in legal circles when it came to Proposition 8 was standing. And the question has now become, If the Attorney General of the state of California and the Governor of the state of California, who are two of the named defendants in this case, simply say they want no part of this, that they actually support turning over Proposition 8. The only people now fighting for it are the defendant interveners, as they're known, and the question becomes: is there any harm being done to these people? They are not being charged with enforcing this. They are not certainly being asked to perform same-sex marriages. So the question becomes, is anyone being hurt by this? And that tends to be the standard by which any sort of emergency stay is granted. So, and it's an open question. Some people feel that because the proponents of Prop 8 have been so involved in this, because they, did essentially handle the defense, that they do have some sort of standing. But a lot of legal experts think they really don't have a dog in the fight.
But they have filed papers opposing lifting the ban.
Yeah, and toot sweet, like they were on it almost immediately.
But this would keep continuing on. I mean, if everything goes smoothly, after the stay, doesn't there become a fundraising effort to try to turn this over yet again?
Oh yeah, I mean, what is amazing, especially in the digital era, is how incredibly quickly people get fundraising letters out. When the decision came out last Wednesday, it was about 45 minutes maybe before the first kind of fundraisers started to hit my inbox. And in talking to people like Jeff Kors, who runs Equality California, I said, you had to have written this beforehand, and he was like, absolutely, we had it ready. And I said, did you have it ready in case you lost? And he said, no, we were confident that we were going to win. So they only had one version ready to go, but they were hitting people up for money before the end of the day.
But the thing is that when you're on the losing side, it becomes an easier fundraising effort. I mean, doesn't it?
Conceivably. I mean, of course, the people that were pushing Prop 8 were actually outspent slightly in the general election campaign in 2008. They have been less aggressive about raising money. It's really been the gay rights groups that have used this really as a rallying cry. There is a certain school of thought that they want to get this back on the ballot in 2012, regardless of what the courts rule, because the one surest way that you could have same-sex marriage in California is if the voters said, we want this.
But even if it goes to the Supreme Court, which is, you're saying that possibly it will,
yeah.
Won't that stop this finally? Is there no stopping, or do we just keep,
Doesn't that
just keep going to the ballot?
State?
I'm going to be reporting on Prop 8 for the rest of my life. I'm pretty convinced.
Swinging back and forth.
No, and once again, there are times in my career when I wish I would have gone to law school. So, but I'm not completely certain. But I will say this: my sense of it is that if it got on the ballot in 2012. And the voters said, okay, this is what we want, that the Supreme Court certainly wouldn't step in and say, no, you can't do that. And there's also, in talking to some of the legal people I talked to today, there's this very interesting idea that perhaps the Supreme Court will just kind of let this case cool for a little while and let it go and let it progress and let it kind of slowly work its way through the courts, under the theory that perhaps the California voters will take care of this themselves.
What do the proponents have to prove to the courts now in order to really get some reversal of the trend that's underway?
Well, there are a couple of arguments that they make that people feel have some merit. One of it is that if the Court of Appeals says on Wednesday, okay, guys, go ahead, let's do same-sex marriage in the state. And then there's a 2 or 3 day period, and then the Supreme Court steps in and says, no, we can't do this, we have to think about this. Then you would have this odd little period of 2 or 3 or 4 days where people were allowed to be married, gay couples were allowed to be married in the state of California, and that would create this certain strange administrative burden where you wouldn't know whether these people were actually legally married, you didn't know whether they would be eligible for benefits, things like that. And that, for some legal scholars, that seems to have a little bit of weight, that it would cause confusion.
Well, we have another case that's in the court of public opinion, and that's your story, David Spark. And that concerns what Google and Verizon would like to do. People are minds are made up as to how they feel about it.
I've never seen such an overwhelming negative response to, I guess, a sort of a public letter is what Google and Verizon put out, which was about net neutrality. And what everyone is getting upset about, and I should point out that net neutrality says that broadband service providers cannot discriminate against any content that goes over the internet, none whatsoever. And that allows for innovation, allows for an equal playing field, if you will. Well, they propose, yes, the internet will stay equal, but the mobile network, and we're going to think about this other network as well that'll be sort of differentiated services. These are the term they use. That should be exempt from net neutrality, and just everyone got upset, incredibly upset as a result.
In other words, everything except these money making.
Well, the internet makes money, but
Yes.
we know these are going to make a lot of money too.
Yeah.
And mobile has, there's a lot of lock-ins with mobile already with the carriers, and also, this other differentiated service is going to behave what we see, because it's all very vague, kind of like cable.
It seems like there was sort of a sense of betrayal too, right? Here, Google, this is Google, do no evil Google, that's always sort of, positioned itself as this defender of net neutrality, a company of the people, sort of. But anyway, and
Free
here they
food,
are.
free food at their offices.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and
Only
who
if you work
doesn't
for
want to
them.
work at Google, right? But, now all of a sudden they're saying, they're sort of stepping back from that. It seems like kind of an about face, doesn't it?
According to the letter they put out yesterday, that is not true, but they still stick, to these 2 points that is getting everyone upset. They haven't been a staunch supporter of net neutrality. The thing is that they have in the past tried to undermine the carriers. They did this when they tried to bid for the open wireless spectrum, the 700 megahertz spectrum, and they tried to bid as much as $4.6 billion, and that's not enough if you want to buy wireless spectrum. And Verizon actually ended up winning the majority of that. And also they tried to undermine the carriers, but with the Google Nexus One phone, where the idea is you buy the phone separate from the carrier. So you buy the phone and then you decide which carrier you want. Again, trying to undermine the carriers. They have admitted that this is a compromise, and this is a pretty severe compromise. But you know what? Mobile is going to be an enormous space of money. They own a company now by the name of AdMob, which they spent $750 million on, that does ads on mobile. They want to monetize this, and Google stock could use a little punch.
Now, how much of a public relations problem is this for them, more than even more than a tech problem?
Again, I've never seen anything as negative as this. So in terms of overwhelming negative response. But at the same time, there was a protest today at Google, of which less than 100 people, I think, showed up. So people were eager to complain about it online, but they weren't so eager to show up,
take the day off work,
and,
right?
and to protest it in person. So yeah, it's negative, but you know what? Google will just continue the conversation. I guess they're going to see it as, oh, well, this is a debate, but most people are like, oh, no debate at all. It's net neutrality for all. But then again, right now, we don't really have net neutrality on mobile devices. They still control things.
Well, how do we get a decision on this? They made a proposal. Who says no?
So,
where's the FCC or whoever is supposed to be?
Right. So the FCC
representing
made a
them?
call out, for opinions on how should we reclassify broadband? And Google and Verizon raised their hand. I got an idea. And so the thing is, the other big thing is, this proposal didn't give the opportunity for the FCC to create any rules or regulations. They were only going to be a police watchdog. So if you somehow violated the principles here, all you could do is fight things on a case-by-case basis. And that was another thing that got everybody upset. I think this is good for the public in general because of the overwhelming negative response. The FCC definitely heard this, but they've said nothing so far. So we're going to have to find out and see what they do next steps.
And there is a next step then.
Well, it's been 5 years of stagnant, no talking, not no talk, but 5 years stagnant, nothing's happened. And that's why everyone's a little bit aggravated. And even the FCC said a decision needs to be made of what we're going to do here. You just have to know the carriers lobby like crazy. So, their influence, even though our public influence is strong, their influence is going to be very strong as well.
Okay, talking about influence, we'll move on to native tribes and their ability to get into the renewable energy field. Now, there's only one tribe that's entered this field in the country.
Yes.
And these are culturally the people who consider themselves the guardian of the earth. Why have there not been more?
Right. There is only one tribe. They're right outside of San Diego, the Campo Kume'e Nation. And yes, this is the only tribe in the country that has a utility-scale renewable energy plant that is plugged into the grid. So there's plenty of tribes that have a solar panel here and there. There are many, many reasons. I mean, the big one that I hear from these tribes more than anything else has to do with this funny position they occupy in the United States. They are sovereign nations. As sovereign nations, they don't pay taxes. Because they don't pay taxes, they can't get federal tax credits. Now, if you're a private company and you want to build a wind farm on someone's land, you are going to get half the cost of that project shaved off because of subsidies from the federal government for renewable energy. Indian tribes can't collect that. And so what happens is they partner with a private company, or, their option is then to partner with a private company. That private company comes in, lo and behold, they get taxed by, the state of California or whatever the local county is. So the tribes also can't tax the private company. So they say, hey, this is the worst of both worlds. We can't collect credits like a private company, but we can't tax like a government. What are you giving us here? That combined with just chronic lack of capital, tribes in this country have unemployment in the 50% and have for decades. These are people who are very much on the margins of our economy.
So how did this one major project get launched around all of those obstacles?
What they did, this is the Campo Kumeyaay Nation, which is just east of San Diego, about 60 miles east of San Diego, is they signed a deal with the private company and they leased their land to the private company. They said, okay, we will rent our land to you, you come and put your wind project there. So this has generated some income for the tribe, and they're enormously proud of their standing as the only tribe in the country to have done this. On the other hand, they don't own this project, and that is both a financial wound, I think is not too strong a word to use, but it's also symbolically difficult because there is a tradition in this country of resource extraction, whether it's timber, whether it's oil, whether it's fish, whether it's minerals, of tribes selling their raw materials and getting very little from it because they don't have the mill, they don't have the canning facility, they don't have the industry where the value is really added to these products. And so what tribes are saying now is California has a real premium on renewable energy right now. We want to take advantage of this and we want to own these plants.
Are there any lobbying efforts being made to try to improve the situation so it will be a more attractive decision for these Indian reservations?
Right, of course, absolutely. And I was telling some of you earlier, I started working on this story as part of a series we're doing for KQED, Quest and Climate Watch, a series on renewable energy. And I got interested, why are there so few of these projects? I started looking into it, and actually there is a piece of federal legislation right now, a bill I should say, in Congress that would help to change things for tribes. It's sponsored by Senator Dorgan of North Dakota, and it's called the Indian Energy Parity Act, and that would help make some of these problems go away. Of course, what we have now is a Congress that seems unwilling or unable to act on most energy legislation, and the fear is that this is just landing on a stack of bills that seems to be going nowhere. And the tribes say, we don't have time to waste on this. This needs to happen now.
Well, there's something called the Bureau of Indian Affairs, who have been either friend or foe, depending on your point of view. Where are they on this issue? Are they mounting or heading up this legislative drive to improve things?
They're not. And what you hear from the tribes is years, sort of the accumulation of years of frustration with an agency that they say does not represent them, does very little except sort of throw up obstructions to these projects. The amount of red tape that tribes have to go through to do pretty much anything on Indian land is formidable and is a real obstacle for them. So one of the things that this bill would change is actually kind of cutting the BIA out of this process a little bit, allowing tribes to directly deal with the private companies, to directly deal with the, whoever the agency is. And by all accounts, that would be a good thing.
And do they view this as a potential alternative to gaming? I mean, gaming has long been kind of the bread and butter.
It has been the bread and butter, yeah. I would say not an alternative to gaming, but for tribes like the Campo Kumeyaay, the one I focused on, they are 60 miles east of San Diego. They're in the middle of nowhere. Yes, they have a casino, most tribes do, but it's a very modest casino. It gets very little traffic. We're in a recession. People aren't really gambling as much as they used to. So tribes need something else, and they certainly feel like this is a positive alternative.
Right. Thank you, Amy. We might remind our viewers that NPR is highlighting KQED's Clean Energy series all of next week on Morning Edition. And you can also find a link at kqed.org/thisweek for comprehensive online coverage from that series. Well, my thanks to all of you for joining us tonight for an interesting discussion. And now some other news from this week. The California legislature, with the support of Governor Schwarzenegger, has taken an $11 billion water bond off the November ballot. They decided to postpone the vote until 2012 because they didn't think it could win this year. And yesterday, a state appeals court upheld a lower court ruling preventing the governor from instituting furloughs for state workers. And lawmakers in Sacramento are taking a second look at the Democratic budget proposal, which raises some taxes and fees while lowering others and using the difference to reduce the state's deficit. And bike riders in San Francisco celebrated this week. An injunction has been lifted that prevented adding any new bike lanes in the city for the last 4 years. And that's all for tonight. Visit kqed.org/thisweek to watch complete episodes and segments of our program. You can also subscribe to our newsletter and our podcast and share your thoughts about the show. I'm Belva Davis. Good night.